Hi everybody. I've got an image open here and I'm going to walk you through the homework assignment. You can follow my step-by-step instructions in the email, or you can follow along in this video, or do both. Now, if you're working in Camera Raw and you open up an image, it's going to open, if you're working with a raw image and you open it up, it's going to open up into the Adobe Camera Raw. If you want to do that, go ahead and finish your global adjustments, meaning adjustments for the whole image, and then open it up in Photoshop. Right now, this file I've got open here is a Photoshop file. It's not a raw file, so it opened up straight into Photoshop. Now, as you can see here, I've just got one background layer in this image, and now I'm going to create an adjustment. I want to lighten up that foreground a little bit. So I'm going to go up here to my adjustments panel, right up here. I'm going to click on that so I can see my adjustment tools right up here. There's a lot of them. We've got brightness, levels, curves, all sorts of things. If you don't see this adjustment panel, go over here to the window, click on that, and go down to adjustments and click it so it's checked. Okay, so in my adjustments panel, we're just going to be working with the curves layer right now. Also, as part of this assignment, you could go in and work with the hue saturation. Those are the most used adjustments that you will do in Photoshop. So I'm going to click on curves here. Now, notice what happened down here in my layers. I've automatically created an adjustment layer. And it's also created a layer mask, which is that little white space to the right of it. Now, there's several different ways you could make your adjustment here, depending upon what you want to do with your image. You could grab the middle of that curve, and you could lighten your image. You could darken it. And notice that's going to darken and lighten the midtones of the image. If I want to lighten the highlights, I would want to drag this over. And if I want to darken the shadows, I would drag that over. If you want to darken the highlights, you could drag that down, although that's not typically something we would do because then you end up with kind of muddy looking highlights. Same for the blacks. You could also drag your blacks up. Although we usually don't do that because then our blacks look kind of muddy. So let's leave it there right now. I'll also show you how you can adjust the color. You can go in here and adjust the red, the green, or the blue. And if I drag up on the red, the image looks more red. If I drag it down, it takes out red, gives it a more cyan look. With these three controls, red, green, and blue, you can control all the color of the image. You don't have to do just one. I could come in here and I could increase my red, and I could also go in here and increase my green. That gives me a more yellowish image. Now if you don't like the way you've moved a curve in the curves panel, take that little dot, when it turns, put your cursor over it till it turns into crosshairs, and you can click on it and drag it off the panel and it disappears. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do the same for the red. I'm going to click on that little square and pull it off. Okay, so now I'm back to the way I had this image originally. All I really want to do is lighten up this area. So I'm going to switch back up to RGB. If you look at the RGB, that adjusts all the layers. So it's basically going to affect lightness or darkness. The individual layers, red, green, and blue, will affect the color. So I'm going to increase the lightness. I'm going to lighten up that foreground. And notice it lightens up everything. It lightens up the tree. It lightens up any kind of midtones we have in the sky. It does not really change our brightest highlights and our darkest shadows. Now, so I'm going to leave it at that now, and I'm going to fill in this layer mask. I'm going to fill it in with black so that my adjustment doesn't show anymore. That way I can go and paint back in my adjustment and do it only where I want to. I'm going to go over here to Edit at the top of the screen, click on it, go down and Fill, and I'm going to select black. Say OK. Now when I did this, I needed to make sure that my layer mask is highlighted with those 4 white corners. If I had selected that instead, and I went over here to Edit, Fill, and black, guess what's going to happen? Whoop! The whole image is black. That's not what I wanted. I just want to make the layer mask black. I'll hit Control Z that is, to reverse that move. All right, so now I go back. I'm going to click on the layer mask again, making sure it's highlighted. And now I'm going to go over to my brush tool. It's right over here. I want the brush tool. I don't want the pencil tool or the color replacement tool or the mixer brush tool. I want to use the brush tool. Now I can reach up here, or I can right-click in the image to set the size of my brush or the hardness of it. Now I'm going to work with a soft brush because I don't want the edges of my adjustment to show. Now there are just a lot of cases where you might want a hard brush if you're trying to make a very fine line of your adjustment. Now I just click anywhere off the image and that menu disappears. You can also use your bracket key, right bracket key to make the brush bigger, left bracket to make it smaller. I'm going to set my opacity pretty low here, but not too low, maybe about 20%. And now I'm going to go in here. Oh, got to make sure my foreground color is white. See that little arrows over there? I'm going to click on that, switch so my foreground color is white. And now, and I've got to make sure your mask is highlighted. Now I can start painting. And I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to paint this until I get it the way I want it. If after doing this you feel like you've gone a little bit overboard, you can always go back into your opacity for this layer and dial it back down a little bit. Okay, so that's it. We've done an adjustment layer and we've painted on our layer mask so we can confine that adjustment to a specific part of the image.